Three, two, one.
Welcome to Moon Trees Live, a distance learning adventure brought to you by the USDA Forest Service and the National Enquirer, with help from our good friends at NASA. So you already know this show is gonna be a blast. All right, enough of that. Hey, I'm your host, M. Chad Edwards. I'm a conservation educator and a partnership specialist with the USDA Forest Service, which manages about 193 million acres of national forests and grasslands throughout the United States. We also work in partnership with tribal and state governments and private landowners to benefit a whole nother 600 million acres, not to mention all the sharing and work we do internationally. Whew. All right, I'm just really glad that I see some familiar faces out there too. I'm really glad that you could join us today to learn about the journey of our little seed friends. Yes, so if you haven't heard about the moon trees before, it's a really exciting science project. The Forest Service provided hundreds of tree seeds to NASA, and then NASA is planning to launch these seeds into space for somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks on a mission called Artemis I. The spacecraft will then come back to Earth, and when it does, the Forest Service will test the seeds to see how they did for their first time hanging out in space. Isn't that kind of amazing? Yeah. Today's going to be amazing too because it's an interactive program. So feel free to share any questions you have with us about moon trees. Just comment on this video while we're live on the Natural Enquirer YouTube channel. And we have some knowledgeable experts standing by who are more than happy to answer you. Our experts include Rachel Bayer, Kelly McCarthy, and Jessica Nicholson. If you see a response from the Natural Enquirer, those answers are coming from our official experts. Our online experts aren't the only folks that are going to be helping us out today. I'm also really excited to have several scientists and specialists here right now live to talk about moon trees. So let me introduce them. We have Iman Beck, Veronica Clausen, and Twyla Schneider from NASA. Welcome, you all.
Hi, I'm excited that you're here. My name is Veronica Clausen, and I am an education specialist at NASA out of the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.
Hello, I'm Twyla Schneider. We're in the Space Launch System program at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
And
hello, I'm Iman, and I'm a NASA education specialist sitting at Johnson Space Center.
yeah, wow, it's so great to have you three here. We also have some experts with us from the Forest Service. We have Cass Dumrose, Kayla Harriman, and Marcus Warwell. Welcome.
Thanks, Sam Chat. We're delighted to be here this morning or this afternoon. Hello, everyone. I'm Cass Dumrose, a plant scientist with the U.S. Department of Agriculture Forest Service.
Hi everyone, I'm Kayla Harriman. I'm a national seed specialist for the USDA Forest Service.
And I'm Marcus Warwell. I'm a regional geneticist for the Forest Service. Thanks for having us here.
Wow, and what cool jobs you all have. These are jobs I didn't even know existed when I was a kid. Thank you all for joining us. Now, enough about us. Let's talk about what we're going to be learning today. We are going to cover the history of moon trees, how we prepare tree seeds for space travel. We're going to talk a little bit about that Artemis I mission and the upcoming journey into space. We're going to look at what is that current seed status and what are the next steps. And finally, we'll look at what happens or what will happen to the seeds when they return from space. So those are our learning objectives for today. And I mentioned that we're going to start with a little bit of history about the project, right? Well, here's a fun fact for all of you Greek mythology lovers. our space mission's name is Artemis I. In Greek mythology, Artemis was the goddess of, well, a lot of things, but one of them was vegetation. Also, she represented the moon. Now, how appropriate is that? We have the Artemis mission that's going to carry vegetation, these seeds, and orbit the moon. Now, also the name Apollo. Now, Apollo was a Greek god who represented the sun, and he was the brother of Artemis. NASA also had a series of space missions called Apollo that went to the moon from 1961 up until 1972. So you see, it's all connected, right? Pretty cool stuff. Now, as exciting as the Moon Tree Project is, we've actually done it before, back with Apollo, right? Well, let's check in with our good friend Dave Williams, who can tell you a little bit more about the history of the program. Dave?
Thanks, MChat. My name's Dave Williams, and I'm a planetary scientist at Goddard Space Flight Center and at the National Space Science Data Center, which is NASA's deep archive for a lot of their spacecraft data. Stuart Roosa, back when he was in high school, for a summer job, he started working in the U.S. Forest Service and eventually became a smoke jumper, which is these guys who jump out of airplanes, they parachute down into forest fires that are remote and can't be reached any other way, and they fight the forest fires. But as part of this, he really became in love with forests. So when he joined the Air Force and then finally was accepted to become an astronaut at NASA, he really wanted to do something to honor the Forest Service. All the astronauts were all afraid of the psychological evaluation because they were afraid that if they said anything wrong, the psychologist would say, oh, he's got issues, he can't go into space. Because they didn't know what to say. And they said, Stuart Roosa, apparently he walked in there and the guy was looking at his file and said, oh, you were a smoke jumper. He goes, what's that? And Stuart Roosa says, oh, well, we jump out of airplanes and parachute and we fight these fires. And he said, the guy kind of looked at him and paused for a second and he goes, if you did that, you'll have no problem as an astronaut. And he just kicked him out. He just said that was the shortest psych interview ever. So when he was chosen for Apollo 14, they came up with this idea to bring tree seeds with him in his personal kit. So he brought about 500 tree seeds up on the Apollo 14 mission. He circled the moon, but as part of the decontamination procedure, they put all the material they brought back with them into a vacuum chamber. And what happened was, unfortunately, they had opened the metal canister before they put it in the vacuum chamber. And when they exposed these plastic bags to a vacuum, they just inflated and they burst, and the seeds flew all over the vacuum chamber. So now there was a problem of the seeds were all scattered and mixed together. Stan Krugman, who was at the Forest Service in charge of the program at the time, told the guys, sweep all the seeds up and get them to me. And he sat there something like 500 seeds, tiny, tiny seeds. He sorted them by hand, put all the redwood seeds together. He put all the sweet gum seeds together, all the sycamore seeds together. So they were now back together. And then the Forest Service germinated them, and then the seeds were planted all over the United States for the bicentennial. They ended up selecting 5 tree species to take. They were selected fairly carefully to cover a wide geographic range around the United States. So they took Douglas firs, which are sort of the northwest and the northern parts of the United States, the redwoods, which are all along the California coast, sycamores, which kind of grow all over the place. They're fairly hardy trees. Loblolly pines, which are mostly southern U.S. plants, and sweet gums, which are sort of in the south and the Midwest and have a fairly wide range also. So those were the 5 species they brought, and the idea being that you could take some of those trees and grow them almost anywhere in the United States. So the status of the trees, there were 500 seeds, but a lot of them died before they ever were germinated or before they became seedlings. Right now, we've located about 70 trees that are alive, and there's about 40 that have died over the years. So I don't really know how many are out there, and no one knows. What's happened also is there are a lot of second-generation moon trees. In other words, people now have taken seeds from first-generation moon trees and have planted them. We have a bunch at Goddard Space Flight Center now. We have a bunch of second-generation trees, but there are literally hundreds and hundreds of these trees. I have no way of keeping track of them. Originally, when I started doing this, I was starting to track these second-generation trees, and it became, it's impossible. There's so many. I have one in my own backyard. I mean, they're all over the place. this next generation of moon trees, which is being planned to go up on the Artemis mission. I'm very excited about it. I think it's cool. You can stuff a heck of a lot of seeds into a little space. So it really is a nice public relations effort for very little cost.
Hey, thanks, Dave. We really appreciate that bit of history. Now, you mentioned a collaboration with the Forest Service and NASA. We actually had the chance to catch up with Veronica Clausen and Heidi McAllister and talk with them about this partnership. So let's take a look at that conversation. Right now, we are with our good friends Heidi and Veronica, and we're going to learn from them a bit about why NASA and the Forest Service have teamed up to do this Moon Trees project in the first place. What's it all about?
Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica Clausen, and I am an education specialist with NASA's Next Gen STEM here at the Johnson Space Center. I want to thank you all for joining us here on Moon Trees Live. We're so excited to continue astronaut Stuart Russo's legacy and provide this bridge between the Apollo and Artemis generations. Our mission at Next Gen STEM is to create unique opportunities for diverse groups of students, engage those students in authentic learning experiences, and keep those students in STEM. The Moon Tree activity provides one of many meaningful connections that you, the students, can have with NASA, its mission, and its work. Our collaboration with the USDA Forest Service is a special one, and we're beyond excited for these seedlings to grow, just like you, across America for generations to come. So stay tuned.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We're so happy to have you. I'm Heidi McAllister, Assistant Director for Conservation Education at the United States Forest Service based out of Washington, D.C. And we are really excited to continue our partnership with NASA on the Moon Trees program. This joint STEM education collaboration shows how spaceflight is integral to our future scientific inquiry here on Earth by connecting Earth and space science, natural resources management, and citizen science around a new generation of moon trees. As you'll see today, our agencies each bring a unique and specialized expertise, which enables us to accomplish a project that neither one of us could do on our own. That's one of the great powers of collaboration. It allows all of us to be greater together. But the success of this project relies on collaborations that extend beyond our two organizations to schools and organizations like yours. Stay tuned. You'll learn more about how you can become involved in this great collaboration a little bit later on. We look forward to seeing all the great things to come out of this project soon.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Those are great points. And let's keep our fingers crossed in the hopes that we do get to do a bunch more of these projects between us and keep the education growing. Thanks. All right, thanks again for joining us. Now, this is a really unique program, and it's designed to make you think. In fact, I have a couple of thoughts for everyone watching this to let orbit around in your brains and think about. So, how do you think that the space travel is going to affect these little tiny seeds? What are some of the ways that we can study that impact? I think we're going to find out soon. So, when our little seed friends return from space, we get to see how they did on their journey. What we're going to do is check if they're viable. Now, viable means that the seeds are still alive and able to sprout and reproduce. If the seeds aren't viable, then they won't be able to grow into the big trees that we know. But if they are viable, we might be able to plant them and watch them grow. Now, I had a little chat earlier with my good friends, Cass, Kayla, and Marcus, and they told me some really interesting things about why we're sending seeds into space and what types of tree seeds are going and how the seeds are being protected during their orbit. That might help out their viability. So let's check out that conversation. we have the opportunity to sit with our scientists, and we're going to have a bunch of questions answered about trees and seeds. Super important stuff. So let's get right into it. All right, Cass, so let's start with you. I was wondering, could you please just tell us why we're doing this Moon Trees project?
Thanks, Amchat, for the question. We have a couple of reasons to complete our Moon Tree project. One certainly is to build upon the legacy of Stuart Roosa and that Apollo 14 Moon Trees project. Another is to begin the process of understanding how we can take seeds into space and make sure that they're viable and that they can survive. And this could have some implications for the future of human space travel and perhaps even how trees could play a role in exploration of space. And by planting moon trees around the country, we provide an opportunity for communities, for your hometowns, to have a tangible, living connection to space exploration. And hopefully, moon trees growing, maybe even on your own school campus, will encourage and inspire students like you to consider a career in science and technology, or maybe at least pursue innovation in any field of study you choose to follow.
All right, so let's check in with you, Marcus. Can you tell us what tree species were chosen for that Artemis I Moon Trees project, and why were those chosen?
Amchat, that's a really good question. There were 5 species that were selected. They were Douglas fir, loblolly pine, giant sequoia, American sycamore, and sweet gum tree. And these trees were selected because they're really well adapted to a broad range of environments across the U.S. They're also really representative of those forests that they occupy. In addition, some of the species had their seed come from more than one location in order to make sure that those seed were adapted to the specific locations that they'd be planted in. 4 of these species were part of the original Apollo 14 mission, and those were the loblolly pine, Doug fir, American sycamore, and sweet gum. So they kind of represent what we call a control. We know how they performed in the past, and we can kind of have an expectation of how they're going to, we would expect them to perform in the future.
Right. So, Kayla, I was curious, was there some sort of like a pre-space flight training that these seeds to go through? No, more seriously, I'm just asking, how were they prepared to go into space? What was that packaging like?
Amchat, that's a great question, because preparing the seed to be traveling all the way to space is really important. Like Marcus mentioned, it's really important to think about the right seed in the right place. And so everybody who was participating in this coordinated with Cass and I to ship their seed to me here in Bend, Oregon. Once I received all the seed, I went through it and I was able to look at each individual lot, which is when we're talking about the loblolly in particular that came from the southeast of the US. I took that seed, sorted it all out into a tray, and then I put it in a machine we have at the extractory called a digital X-ray machine. That digital X-ray machine is really magical, and it allows me to see what's going on inside that seed coat and determine whether that seed has tissue that we think will become a tree. We're looking for 2 things. We're looking for this embryo, which is essentially the baby tree that's hidden inside of that seed. And that embryo is what's going to become a tree. We're also looking for the endosperm, which is what surrounds the embryo. And that's what's going to give it all its nutrients to become an actual green seedling. So think of a bean in your garden. Once that bean starts sprouting, that's when it turns green and it's able to work with sunlight to start creating its own nutrients. Until then, it's really important that there's an endosperm and an embryo in conjunction inside that seed. That's what we're looking for inside the X-ray. Once I was able to determine that all of the filled seed were separated from any potential empty seed, then I could start to package it so that it would safely travel to the moon. Here in Bend, we use a 6mm plastic, which means that the plastic bag we put our seed in is thin enough to support the seed and not take up a lot of space and be very bulky, but it's also thick enough so it doesn't allow a lot of moisture to go in and outside of that bag. You'll see photos of these seed raviolis as we talk about them. The seed is packaged inside each of those raviolis in equal proportions. So all those species that Marcus talked to you about and the species that came from multiple locations across those ranges are represented in each segment of the ravioli, because we know that space is limited on that rocket ship. And it's really important for the astronauts to be able to modify what's in their payload. So they can just take and cut one of those raviolis and shorten the length of seed headed up to the moon if they needed to. So the packaging we use for seed storage is really important. Like I mentioned, we don't want a lot of moisture to go into the package or out of the package. So these seed were dried down to a level that allows them to be dormant. So essentially the seed are just in a state of taking a nap, and they're hanging out in the rocket ship, and they'll make their travels underneath a seat, probably underneath the captain's seat, and then they'll come back down where then we can put them into our nursery system, and we can spark those seed and wake them up, and they will start to germinate and create.
Wow, that is a lot of work. Now, how did this preparation help to maintain seed viability? Oh, and just to remind the folks who are at home, since we're using this term so much, viable means alive and still able to sprout and reproduce.
That's true, AmChat. That's a great definition of what is viable. Within the Forest Service, we work a lot with various seed, and it's so important to package the seed so that it stays viable, because that's how we can be successful in all of our efforts on the ground. When we think about viable seed, a couple things that are really important is that the seed is dry, and it's kept dry because moisture starts to harbor mold. And we've found that if we can keep seed dry in the appropriate packaging, it can store in a freezer for up to 50 years and still be viable.
Wow, that was really interesting, Kayla. And perhaps folks in the audience will have even more questions about seeds and viability. We'll see.
The seed is awesome.
I looked it up and that looks like the way it would be pronounced.
Fair enough, that's enough. Thank you so much, Cass, Kayla, and Marcus. You all touched on, the Artemis mission and the seed's path through space. You know what? Really quickly, let's pause to give a shout out to some of our friends. We have Mrs. Warren's 3rd grade class from Bethel Elementary in Western North Carolina. Yeah. Thanks for joining. Also, some of the students at North Lakeland, the 6th grade. They're in Manitowish Waters, Wisconsin. Yeah. Also, Will Rogers Junior High, their 6th grade is also joining us. We have folks from Washington Elementary in Clinton, Oklahoma. And some of the questions that you all have been asking, thank you for sending those. They were answered in the last segment, so we won't take those live. But man, I love the way your brains are working. Thanks. Keep those coming. All right, really quickly, y'all know that we've got great experts here, and I had a chance to talk to our good friends, Eman, Karen, and Kelly from NASA, and they told us a little bit more about this Artemis mission. So let's take a look at that conversation. All right, hey everyone, we are here with Eman, Karen, and Kelly. Can you all please tell us a little bit about the rocket Artemis?
The seeds are hitching a ride on Artemis. Artemis is an uncrewed flight test and the first in a series of missions providing the foundation for human deep space exploration and demonstrating NASA's commitment and capability to extending human presence to the moon and beyond. Artemis I will test NASA's Space Launch System rocket, SLS, and the Orion spacecraft as they travel around the moon and in the extreme environment of deep space before flying astronauts on Artemis II. One of the most exciting parts about the Artemis program is that NASA plans to land the first woman and the first person of color on the moon, inspiring the next generations of explorers, you, the Artemis generation.
Wow, thanks, Karen. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering about how the seed's journey is going to look like. So let's talk about Artemis I. Although Artemis I is an uncrewed mission, we are very excited about the special payload of seeds. So let's talk about their journey. During liftoff, the Space Launch System, or SLS, will provide about 8.8 million pounds of thrust, propelling the Orion spacecraft on an almost 1 million mile journey to the moon and back. At launch, the SLS will be the most powerful rocket in the world. The rocket is powered by 4 RS-25 engines, liquid hydrogen and oxygen boosters, and 2 solid rocket boosters. As Orion continues its path from Earth orbit to the moon, it will fly about 62 miles above the moon's surface. Then, using the moon's gravitational force, Orion will propel itself into what we call the distant retrograde orbit, where it will continue to orbit the moon and collect data. It will then do another close flyby of the moon before firing its engines and using the moon's gravitational force to propel itself and accelerate back to Earth. The seeds will have traveled about 1.3 million miles and spent about 6 weeks in space before returning home back to Earth.
Wow, what an amazing journey! I'm sure you're all wondering how the seeds were packaged and loaded onto Artemis I. Following their packaging for flight, the seeds were placed in something called the Orbital Flight Kit, or OFK. The OFK is a foam locker that contains a variety of items approved and listed on the flight's manifest. A manifest is like a list of the spacecraft's cargo, similar to on a ship or an airplane. If you've ever flown on an airplane before, you were on the flight's manifest. The OFK was then shipped to Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida, where it was finally installed in the spacecraft and secured with straps, kind of like a seatbelt. The seeds are also protected and packed with 2 layers of material so that they don't become separated or loose inside the OFK.
Nice. Well, that answered a lot of my questions. But what about the questions you all have at home? Everybody watching this program out there in TV land. Let's check back in with our panelists and see if they can help us out. Coming back in 5. Wow. I am learning a lot today, and I hope that all of you watching this are learning a bunch as well. In fact, while we're on bunches, let's just give a bunch of shout outs to those students watching us at home. Here we go. We have Miss Jacket's 5th grade from Ellettsville, Indiana. Mrs. Parker's 4th grade class from New Jersey. Also, LL Wright in Ironwood, Michigan. The 6th grade class is with us. They are in the house. Yes. Okay, back to the bunches. I just found out that we packaged a bunch more tree seeds and they were loaded onto the spacecraft. And that's because we've had a couple of delays with Artemis I's launch. So now with these fresh seeds, we can be sure that, they're super fresh and that the ones that are going up into space have a better chance of being viable, right? So now let's talk about the launch. We have the latest date. You ready? As of right now, NASA's going to try to launch on Monday, November 14th, 2022. And that's just a couple of weeks away if you're watching this live. So please, let's keep our fingers crossed that our little seed buddies are going to get up into space sometime next month. Yes. Okay. Fingers crossed. Now, let's check in back in with our panelists who are so excited. They're getting tongue-tied just like me. We have a quick question. And that question, I think this one might be for you, Cass. The question is, how long does it take for the seeds to grow?
I think Kayla and I are going to double team this a little bit, but seeds can take anywhere from just a few days to maybe more than a month before they'll actually sprout. Depends on the species. And then once they've sprouted, it can take them decades to grow up to be old enough to reproduce and make their own seeds. Kayla, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about this particular group of seeds, they'll end up at a Forest Service nursery. And ideally, we can grow a seedling in just a couple of years. But like Cass said, it'll take quite a while before that seedling becomes as tall as you guys.
And I'll just add a little bit more to And if we plant those seedlings in a location that they're well adapted to grow and survive on, we can expect them to live for hundreds of years after that.
There's a follow-up question that came in. How do you wake up a dormant tree seed?
Sure, I can touch on that. So seed dormancy is how seeds adapt to their environment so that they can germinate at the right time in the right place. So ideally, when there's enough moisture. There's a few types of dormancy, in particular, a physical dormancy, such as a really thick seed coat that might need to be scratched or go through a bird's belly and have a little bit of acid in the bird's stomach break down that seed coat. Or there can be a physiological dormancy. So it just depends on the type of seed and how we need to break through that seed coat, imbibe that seed, which means give it a lot of moisture, and then that seed will germinate.
Wow, we're getting a bunch of great questions in, and thank you for those explanations. Unfortunately, we've hit our half-an-hour time limit for our friends at NASA. We're gonna say thank you to them. Let's just wave at them from your seats. Everybody wave at our friends from NASA because they have to step away. But we do have a few of our Forest Service panelists who can stay a little bit longer because we have so many questions coming in. So do you guys want to say bye, Eman or Veronica?
I will say something. It's so great to be a part of this. We're so excited to have you on this journey with us, and thank you. And just follow Artemis on the nasa.gov website.
Thank you for including me. It's been a great day. Keep in mind, November 14th launches at 12:07 a.m. Eastern Time.
Thank you, everyone. We're so excited to have you, and thank you for all the great questions. And be sure to email us. We'll put the email in the chat. If you have any additional expert questions for the NASA panel, we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you so much. Bye.
Goodbye.
All right. Thank you all so much for having joined us. This question just came in. How old will the seeds that get launched into space be?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think, again, Kayla may have more information on this, but I think most of the seeds that we're sending into space are less than 5 years old. Kayla?
Yeah, so the seed that we sent into space was strategically selected from seed lots that were in storage. Most of them are less than 5 years old, but actually one of the Douglas fir lots is just a little bit older than that, probably a little closer to your guys' age. But most of it has been in a freezer storage, appropriately stored so that we could take it out just for this reason, or to take it out and put it out onto forest landscapes for restoration.
Oh, thank you. And you all are really making this plain and simple. Like, I'm even understanding and following, and I'm not a tree seed saver. The next question that came in, it was asking about the Apollo 14 mission and comparing it to this one. So the question is, the Apollo 14 mission took up redwood tree seeds, but the Artemis mission took up giant sequoia. Why might scientists change and change direction about which seeds they used?
That's a really good question. Scientists switched these species because giant sequoia is adapted to survive and grow over a broader range of environments in comparison to redwood trees. So that means we'll be able to plant giant sequoia in more places to share with more people.
Another follow-up question, where are these Forest Service nurseries that will grow the seedlings?
Yeah, I'll take that one, MChat. So the Forest Service has 6 nurseries. There's one in Watersmeet, Michigan, one in Halsey, Nebraska, one in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, another in Boise, Idaho, one in Central Point, Oregon, and one just outside of Placerville, California. And we also have 2 seed extractories, one in Oregon and one in Mississippi, that help process the seeds that we use in our nurseries.
Thank you, Cass. You might have answered this one, but the one that just came in, we had a bunch of questions coming in about where will these moon trees be able to grow? And someone specifically asked, will they be able to grow in northern Wisconsin and in the Midwest? And I think you're telling us yes.
I am telling you yes. We tried to pick seeds, species, and sources of seeds that could be planted in various places across the United States, just so that everyone can participate in the Moon Trees program.
Thinking about everybody, and now it's funny, some of the kids are asking about everybody left on the screen here. What's your favorite tree? It's hard. I know we have so many friends. If you had to pick a favorite tree, what would it be?
It have to be one of them that we're thinking about as being a moon tree? Or could it be any kind of tree?
It doesn't say that in a question. I think the kids just want to know a little bit about you, Cass.
Okay, well, my favorite tree is koa from the state of Hawaii, just because it's a really big old tree and it's good for birds.
Well, that's a fun question. It's not easy to answer. I've been in the Forest Service for 25 years, so I've gotten to spend a lot of time with a lot of trees. But I have to say, if I had to pick one, it would be white bark pine. It grows in the high mountains and Rocky Mountains and the Cascades, and these are just really beautiful places. And I've had a chance to work with that tree for most of my career, so that'd be the one I'd pick.
Yeah, I think if I were to pick a favorite tree, it actually isn't one that's going up, but I would probably pick the sugar pine. And that's just because I've done a lot of tree seed collection, and sugar pine was probably the most difficult to collect, but the most fun. The cones are really, really long. They can be, 12 to 18 inches long, and the seed is really delicious. It's the best tasting pine that you've ever had.
That's fun to think about. I'll tell mine really quickly. My favorite tree, just for today, because it changes every single day. My favorite tree for today is going to be the pawpaw, because it's North America's largest native fruit. They're so delicious and so good. So if you haven't heard about those before, go ahead and check them out. And my mama, Michelle, is going to be so happy when I tell you that it is the cousin to the soursop tree, which is found in more tropical places. And she's going to be proud that I pronounced soursop the right way. Okay. So mine is the pawpaw. All right. Thank you all so much. And I'm the bearer of the news that we really do have to stop for now. I really appreciate everybody who stayed on a little bit longer than we originally planned. Oh, thank you all so much for these great questions and the great conversation. Now, before we go, I did want to mention that we'll continue tracking these seeds throughout their journey. So be sure to check in on the Natural Enquirer website to get the latest information. If you want to keep up to date about Artemis I in general, keep checking out the NASA website. In the meantime, we still want to hear from you. So please send us a message or a question to this email address. You ready? fsconservationeducation@gmail.com. That's FS like Forest Service, conservationeducation@gmail.com. Tell us what you thought of this program. And if you have a specific question for NASA about moon trees, you can reach out to them too. Just send your questions to JSC-STEMON station@mail.nasa.gov. I'm sure you can see that better than I could read that. So send them that message and their experts are going to be more than happy to answer you. I want to thank all of our friends who helped us today from both the USDA Forest Service, the National Enquirer, and NASA. And of course, a big thanks to you for watching. If you're interested in this or any of the other programs like this one, you can check them out at fsnaturelive.org. We have programs on climate change, freshwater, grasslands, pollinators, bats, and so much more. Remember to blast off and keep an eye out for updates on our tree seeds. We will see you soon.
Have a range clear launch. 3, 2, 1.